So thank you to everybody for joining us again. We appreciate that. And we're going to continue with the Lalitavistara Sutra. And tonight we are actually going to quickly review chapter 5, which we had read a couple of weeks ago, and just to get ourselves back into our mind stream, and then we'll continue to chapter 6 in the womb. So we'll start with our short refuge prayer, just a couple of brief prayers tonight. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chodam la, shangju baidu dagni kapsuchi, tagi jin soki pe sonamgi, Drola penshir sangye jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gurdang dempar jorchi. Dugnao dang dunao gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dugnao me pe dewadang mi drawar jorchi. May ring jak dang ni dang drawe, plang namla ne pa jorchi. Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow, to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Drista Dredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sitsa Me Sitsan Shriya Kuruhum. Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Saratada Gata Bajra Mame Mansa Bajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattvaha. Om Bajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Drista Dredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara karma sitsame, sitsan shriya kuruhung. Ha 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 ho Bhagavan. Sara tada gata bajra mame mansa bajri bhava mahasamaya satvaha. The Sagari Mati requested sutra. Likewise, be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink peacefully. Enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Very good. Thank you all. I took some time this past weekend to reread the introduction, and it's very, very good. I recommend it to everybody. It goes through all the different chapters and has a couple sentences or so of each chapter, which is good. The ones that we've already done, the ones that we are about to do. But then after that, then it goes in and it gives a little bit of the of setting what the Lalitavistara playing full is all about and so on. So it's good that it refreshed my memory and also gave a little bit of how this sutra came about. And it's kind of an amalgamation, if I'm not pronouncing that right, a compilation of several different things that had been studied and talked about several hundred years after the Buddha had passed. So instead of it being, I had said many times that it was an original, but it actually is a composite of some original things. So to get that into a better perspective was helpful to me in being able to understand that. And that this particular translation is from a Tibetan translation from the 9th century, from a Dege, Tibetan Buddhism. Dege is a certain area of Tibet that had practices and lineage and so on. So this came from there, as it said. But it's also, taken from many of the Mahayana sutras that came from India and so on. So you might find that useful when you have time to read through that and maybe do it in sections because it is a lot to be able to take in. And I had to read it a couple different times and take notes on there to really try and get it all to sink in. And I think I still need to read it several more times. So I think understanding this is really the reason why we're studying the sutras in the first place. So what we've been studying thus far with chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 and into 5 was what was happening in the Bodhisattva in capital letters, the Bodhisattva who was to be the Buddha Shakyamuni. So the Bodhisattva had many lives before he became Buddha. And so this is talking about, how this all coalesced now into the life of the Bodhisattva being in Tushita heaven, and how all the work that he had done now was all coming together, and he's recognizing this. And he's remembering the important parts that are worth talking about in terms of the gateways to the light of the Dharma. So he's putting this all together and he's presenting this to the gods that they may follow him into being a human being, because here he is in a God realm, in the Tushita God realm, and knowing that he has to be incarnated again in order to bring the Dharma to human beings on this planet. So this is the imagery that is being portrayed and so on, and the thoughtfulness that he's going into about what these gateways to the light of the Dharma. So that was chapter 4, and it's very, very, very useful, very, very powerful, and so on. So then the next part was chapter 5, which we did read last time. I remember now that we went through that all, but we didn't talk about it very much. So I just wanted to say that what the Bodhisattva was in a state of samadhi. And to be in that state of samadhi, he had to stabilize the gateways to the Dharma. He had to be the Dharma in order to bring the Dharma. It wasn't something that he was going to actually discover on his own. It was something that he was going to reveal. So, so understanding this is important. So this samadhi of mindfulness, of understanding, of comprehension, and consciousness in this stable, mindful way, in this stability, this samadhi. So we go through samadhi ourselves, we develop samadhi in a sequential path, and it takes some time. It's the graduated path. So we build on it, build on it, build on it. We may find that we have to loop back because we've had moments where we've lost our attention. We have to rekindle that attention and so on like that. And that's part of the natural progression to do that. The Buddha had, or the Bodhisattva had stabilized this to the point where now he is ready to present it to all beings. And we have, we are the beneficiaries of that. And we, to some degree or another, have accomplished some stability in this ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, because those people, those beings who have not been able to do that are far from the Dharma. And so we've talked about them being in the disconnected family and the hearer family and so on like that. So we have a stable connection, although we're working to strengthen that. So the Bodhisattva is saying in chapter 5 and setting out, he's saying, this is my life now. This is what I'm going to do. As a Bodhisattva in Tushita heaven, his life is an absolute kind of a life. It has no phases to it or anything. It's not a phenomenal life. It's like an ultimate life. It's being in this heaven that we might talk about, this nirvana. But now he's saying, well, this is going to be my life. I'm going to incarnate as a human being in order to bring this to beings and so on. So I'm preparing the way for beings to be able to bring the Dharma into their lives. And I'm preparing the way for the Bodhisattva Maitreya to become the Buddha Maitreya, who will follow me in being able to continue the teachings. So the Buddha Maitreya is very important and a strong motivation for the Bodhisattva. So so he says, I have lives to go. I have lives that I need to engage in. Buddha Maitreya being that, being part of that, because once you reach that level of the Buddha, you see that all the Buddhas are contained with any one of the Buddhas. If I can use those words, there's no boundaries or anything like that. But once you know one Buddha, you know all the Buddhas. So he realizes that there's many lives to be led, much work to be done. There's fields of activity that must be done, and so on. So that his life as Buddha Shakyamuni, this may be his last life, but he's preparing the way for Buddhas to come, future Buddhas to come, and so on. So, so his first part in doing this is the conception, is to be conceived in the womb of his mother and coming together with the sperm, coming together with the egg, and so on. So this is the setting out. So that's chapter 5. So we read that last time. If you have any comments about that or questions, we can talk about it now. Otherwise, we'll go on to the next chapter. Does anybody have any thoughts that you'd like to discuss?
So, and like all the discussion about like the appropriate, I guess, parents that he would enter in, is that basically how it's like for everybody, where you have whatever your journey is and you have to kind of wait for the perfect sort of situation so you can continue your own journey, your own karma?
Well, it depends on what degree that you can recognize that. Most people, it is completely, I don't want to say accidental, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no control there. But as become more and more stable in the samadhi, the more control you have over your parents and recognizing your parents and so on like that.
Meaning the intention to enter in a family that where you can get more quickly right away to spiritual work.
Correct.
Got
So,
it.
so whether it's love, whether it's
Mhm.
riches, whatever, yes, there is an intention there. There is an intention to be born in a family and among people who are going to support you in your work as in the Dharma. So yes,
Okay.
and I guess that's a good question to ask everybody. Do you have a sense of that? What is your sense of that? With your parents and everything, do you feel like your parents were, such an important part of your lives? Of course they were, but was it something that they brought to you, or that you were able to generate in your life as a result of being their sons or daughters?
Lance, I have that connection with my dad. My dad's very deeply religious, and he named me after the prophet of Muhammad very intentionally. My mom and I don't have that connection. I don't know if anyone else can resonate with like one parent over another, but that is for me, my dad opened that pathway for me. Like I feel like it's a very intentional connection.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to that?
Well, I'm not sure. Are you talking, Lance, just about a religious connection or the spiritual or other types of energy that your parents imparted to you?
Well, I think I'd like to concentrate just on the spiritual part of things, whether there was, maybe there wasn't, and but just that, to kind of be mindful, well, what kind of a connection did I have with my parents? And, can I sense that spiritual connection?
Well, I'm not sure that I can answer that in the context of what you're talking about. I do have a spiritual connection with them. It's a different type of. My parents were products of a great time of struggle, as your parents were too. Uh, and I think that the energy and will that they imparted me was certainly a belief in something greater than myself, but an understanding that there will always be struggles facing us in life, that things will never be easy, and that the idea of easy is an illusion.
Okay, that's very good.
They were products of the Depression, as I'm sure yours were too.
Right.
And of course the Great War, and that left in them a feeling that I can only attempt to grasp if you don't go through it. You can
Right.
only try to understand it.
Right. Would anybody else like to comment?
Lance, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but I feel like my dad and I have a spiritual connection from a previous reincarnation. If that's what you're trying to get at, like I feel like my dad and I did something. I don't feel that way with my mom. If that's what you're asking, like at a more deeper energetic level, I feel like my dad and I have some kind of shared karma to resolve, and my mom and I I don't know. I don't know, but I definitely feel what you're talking about with my dad. If that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's abstract, but I understand what you're trying to ask.
Okay, thank you. Well, for myself, I'll just say that, I didn't have my parents weren't strong spiritual people, and they didn't impart spirituality, training on me or anything, or my brother or my sister, but there was a undeniable deep love between them, and that was shared with their children, myself, my brother, and my sister, and that for me has always been like a guiding light. This love, what love is, and so on. I can always reflect back and think of them, and think of what love is, and in that human way. So that led me to other things.
That's very similar to my, in a lot of ways, to my experience. What you're describing, there wasn't like much of an explicit spiritual kind of bent or religious bent or anything like that, and certainly not with anything Eastern in any way. But yeah, very similar to what you're saying, and actually even like with what you were saying, Gary, about your parents, realizing as I got older how much my experience growing up was also shaped by that generation and the suffering of that generation of your parents, and the trauma of that and the way that was passed down through my parents in a very direct way, and then kind of how that just impacted different dynamics to get into, but it's making me think of.
Very good, thank you. When I first got really introduced to the idea of reincarnation and what that meant, and what that meant to me, and I had this overwhelming, thought, dream, whatever you want to call it, hallucination, whatever you want to call it. I was a reincarnation of Copernicus. And Copernicus was the one who went to the Pope or whatever and said, hey, we're not going around, everything's not going around the earth, it's going around the sun. So this was revolutionary at the time, and so on. So I went to my parents, very intentionally, and said to them, wow, this is who I am. And they thought I was, nuts. But at the same time, it led to a cosmic kind of a conversation with them about what the cosmos is, and it surprised me about how in tune they were to the words I was using, and to the thoughts I was trying to express, in terms of the dynamics of planets and galaxies, and spatial objects and so on, like that. They did not dismiss that at all, and that always surprised me that they did that, and that became a comforting thing to me as things progressed and so on. So anyway, so I'm just sharing. So I've heard and read, several accounts of the life of the Buddha, and within this sutra, there's an authenticity to it, and most direct accounts, are remembered and given in this particular text and everything. So in some ways, it's setting the record straight. In some ways, it's maybe left to interpretation as well. And the interpretation comes from the personal experience of doing this, because what the Bodhisattva is demonstrating is what it is to become a Buddha, what the intention of a human being to become a Bodhisattva, to become a Buddha. That's what the real lesson is here. So that's something that becomes transpersonal. So entering the womb now becomes the next part. So if we can, why don't we go through and read this? So there's 6 of us here tonight. So it'll take a little bit of time for us to go through this. So why don't we start with Gary? Will you start? I'm just going in order of what I see your images on my screen here. So Gary, why don't you read the first page, which would be 6.1 to 6.5. And then Debbie, will you read the next page, please? And then Kunga, will you read the third page? And then Zara, will you read the next page after that? I guess that's the fourth page. And then Matt, will you read the fifth page? And then I'll read the sixth page. And then we'll continue that order until we complete this. And try and read it, slowly, intentionally, so that everybody can grasp, what's being said here. And if while you're listening or while you're reading, and there's something that you say, oh, I'd like to go back over that. Maybe if you've got a pencil or something and you can make a mark in your book so that we can come back to that, I think will be most useful. So is that okay? Anybody have any concerns? Okay. Well then, Gary, when you're ready, please begin with entering the womb.
Months. The cold season had passed, and it was the third month of the spring. It was the finest season, when the moon enters the constellation Visakha. The leaves of trees unfurled, and the most exquisite flowers blossomed. It was neither cold nor hot, and there was no fog or dust in the air. Fresh green grass covered the ground everywhere. The Lord of the three worlds, revered by all the worlds, now judged that the time had come. On the 15th day, during the full moon, while his future mother was observing the Bodhisattva precepts during the constellation of Pusha, the Bodhisattva moved, fully conscious and aware, from the fine realm of the heaven of joy, the womb of his mother. He entered through his mother's right side in the form of a baby elephant, white in color, with 6 tusks. His head was the color of a reddish insect, and the tusks were blazing gold. He had all his limbs intact and his full faculties. As he entered, he stayed only at the right side of the womb, and never on the left. As this occurred, Queen Maya was sleeping on her pleasant bed and saw the following in her dream. A snowy, silver-colored elephant with 6 tusks, beautiful feet, exquisite trunk, and a pretty red head, moving in a fine gait with joints as stable as a diamond. That perfect elephant entered her womb. She had never seen, heard of, or experienced such a rare happiness. Feeling this physical and mental bliss, she became absorbed in contemplation.
As she awoke, Queen Maya first adorned herself with ornaments and flowing garments. Refreshed in body and mind, she felt affectionate, joyful, and calm. She then arose from her bed and made her way down from the upper floors of the palace, surrounded by her female attendants. She proceeded to the Ashoka tree forest, where she felt at ease. Once there, she sent a message to King Shuodana. Your Majesty, please come. The Queen would like to see you. When King Shuodana heard this message, he became very elated, and immediately he rose from his throne. Surrounded by his ministers and townspeople, attendants and relatives, he went to the Ashoka forest. However, as he arrived, his body suddenly felt very heavy, and he was unable to enter the forest. In this way, he just stood at the entrance to the Ashoka forest. Reflecting a little, he then spoke these verses. I do not remember my body ever feeling this heavy, even as I led my army of warriors into battle. Now I cannot even enter my own property. Can anybody tell me what has happened? Some gods of the pure realms had settled in the middle of the sky. Now they revealed half their bodies and spoke these verses to King Shuodana. Your Majesty, a Bodhisattva, a great being with qualities of austerity and discipline, honored by the three worlds, loving and compassionate, and empowered by merit and wisdom, He has left the heaven of joy for the womb of Queen Maya in order to become your son. Then, joining his palms and bowing his head, the king went into the forest, overwhelmed by reverence and awe. Without pride or arrogance, he looked at Queen Maya and asked, "What may I do for you? Tell me what to do." The queen replied, "A fine and beautiful elephant, white as snow or silver, more dazzling than the sun and the moon, well proportioned, with beautiful legs, 6 great tusks, and joints as firm as diamond, entered my womb. Please listen to this story. In my sleep, I saw this trichilocosm illuminated, its darkness gone. While 10 million gods were praising me, I felt no anger, aggression, hatred, or confusion. I felt peaceful and full of the bliss of concentration."
I wonder if this dream of mine shows happiness or sorrow for our family. Is my dream a genuine prediction? Your Majesty, quickly summon the priests, who are specialists in the Vedic treatises on dreams. Hearing these words, the king instantly summoned the priests, who were experts in the Vedas and their treatises. When the priest stood before Queen Maya, she said, "Listen to my story. This is what I dreamed." The Brahmins replied, "Your Majesty, please speak. When we hear what you saw in your dream, we will explain." The queen replied, "A fine and beautiful elephant, white as snow or silver, more dazzling than the sun and the moon, well proportioned, with beautiful legs, 6 great tusks, and joints as firm as diamond, entered my womb. Please listen to this story." As I heard these words, the priest remarked, "Your clan shall meet no sorrow, for only extensive delight. A son will be born to you, his limbs adorned with the marks. He will belong to the lineage of kings, a great universal monarch. If he renounces his pleasures, his kingdom, and his palace, and goes forth as a monk, unattached, full of compassion and love for the world, he will become a Buddha worthy of offerings in the 3 worlds. He will satisfy the world with the supreme taste of the nectar of immortality." Following this positive prediction, the priests had their meal in the royal palace, accepted an offering of gifts, and subsequently departed. Monks, when King Suddhodana heard that the message from the priest, who understood how to analyze marks and signs, and who knew the scriptures related to dreams, he was satisfied, impressed, delighted, and joyful. He felt blissful and happy. He pleased the priest by offering them delicious food and drink. When they were all full, he entertained them and presented them with gifts before they departed.
At the same time, as an offering to the Bodhisattva, alms were distributed at the 4 gates of the city of Kapilavastu, and at all its crossroads and junctions. The king offered food to those who were hungry and drink to those who were thirsty. He offered clothes to those who needed clothing, carriages to those who required transportation, perfumes to those who desired perfume, garlands to those who wished for garlands, oils to those who wanted ointments, sheets to those who longed for bedding, shelter to the homeless, and necessities to those who yearned for provisions. Then monks, King Shodahana, considered, "I wonder in which residence Queen Maya can stay happily and without affliction." At that very instant, the 4 great kings approached King Shodahana and spoke to him. "Your Majesty, do not worry. Remain happily in equanimity. We will prepare a palace for the Bodhisattva." Then Sakra, Lord of the Gods, approached King Shodahana and spoke to him. "Palaces of the protectors are no good. Those of the heaven of the 33 are better. I will give the Bodhisattva a palace equal to my Vajrayanta." Then a god from the heaven, free from strife, approached King Sudahana and spoke to him. "When 10 million gods of Sakura's realm see my mansion, they marvel. The glorious house, the best of the heaven, free from strife, I give to the king's son." Then a god from the heaven of joy approached King Shodahana and spoke to him. "Previously, this renowned being dwelt in a delightful palace when he was in the heaven of joy. That palace I will now offer to the Bodhisattva." Then a god from the heaven of delighting and emanations approached King Sodahana and spoke to him. "A glorious, mentally created mansion that is made of jewels I will give to Bodhisattva King in act of worship."
Then a god from the heaven of making use
No,
of.
no. It's Matthew.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Then a god from the heaven of making use of others' emanations approached King Suddhodana and spoke to him. The resplendence of my mansion eclipses the light and colors of any beautiful mansion anywhere in the desire realm. So let me give that glorious mansion as an offering to the Bodhisattva. Your Majesty, I will bring my beautiful jewel palace. It is strewn with divine flowers and scented with divine perfumes. I will offer this spacious palace. There the queen may remain. Monks in this way, each of the eminent gods of the desire realm, individually presented their respective residences as an offering to the Bodhisattva, right there in the fine city of Kapilavastu. King Sudananda also provided an excellent mansion. It far surpassed those built by other humans, although it could not match the divine palaces. However, by the power of the Bodhisattva resting in the absorption known as the Great Array, Queen Maya appeared in all of those residences. During the period when the Bodhisattva stayed in Queen Maya's womb, he remained on the right side of the womb, seated in a cross-legged posture. In addition, all the chief gods believed that the mother of the Bodhisattva remained only in the residence they had given her, and not anywhere else. On this topic, it is said, while the Bodhisattva remained in the absorption known as the Great Array, he emanated inconceivable magical displays, which perfectly fulfilled the wishes of all the gods. The wishes of the king, too, became fulfilled. Then some gods among the assembly began to wonder. Even the gods in the heaven of the four great kings turned back when they approached human habitations. So what about the gods of the highest order, those in the heaven of the 33, the heaven free from strife, or the heaven of joy? How could the pure Bodhisattva, who was free from bad-smelling odors, superior to the entire world, a jewel among beings, transmigrate from the divine realm of the heaven of joy and remain for 10 months in the foul-smelling human body inside his mother's womb?
Then, at that time, by the power of the Buddha, Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, O Blessed One, the thus gone one has taught how the female body is inferior and enjoys desire. That was astonishing. But, Blessed One, it is even more astonishing that when you, who are superior to all worlds, were a bodhisattva in the past, you moved from the divine realm of the heaven of joy and entered your mother, remaining in a human body on the right side of the womb. Blessed One, you have mentioned how it all happened, and yet it is simply beyond me. The Blessed One asked, Ananda, would you like to see the jeweled structure that the Bodhisattva delighted in? The one that became the Bodhisattva's delight as he stayed in his mother's womb? Ananda replied, Yes, please. Blessed One, right away. Well gone one, now would be a perfect time. If the thus gone one should reveal the Bodhisattva's delight, it would be a great pleasure to witness it. Then, through the Blessed One's doing, Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, disappeared from the Brahma realm together with 6,800,000 gods of that same realm. They all appeared in the presence of the Blessed One, where they prostrated at the feet of the Blessed One and circled him 3 times. Then Brahma stood to one side, bowing to the Blessed One. Although the Blessed One knew already, he asked Brahma, the Lord of the Saha world, Brahma, did you remove the structure that delighted me in the past when I was a bodhisattva and stayed for 10 months in my mother's womb? Brahma replied, Yes, Blessed One, indeed, well gone one. Well, Brahma, the Blessed One inquired, Where is it now? Brahma responded, Blessed One, it is in the Brahma realm. In that case, Brahma directed the Blessed One, Fetch this structure that delighted me as a bodhisattva for 10 months, and show it to everyone so they can know how it was constructed. Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, now spoke to the gods of the Brahma realm, saying, Please wait here until I bring the jeweled structure that delighted the Bodhisattva. Then Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, prostrated with his head at the feet of the Blessed One, before disappearing from the presence of the Blessed One. In that very instant, he reached the Brahma realm. There he spoke these words to the god Subrahma.
Friend, go from this Brahma realm up to the heaven of the 33 and tell them, we are bringing the jeweled structure that delighted the Bodhisattva, and we are taking it into the presence of the Blessed One. Those among you who would like to see it should come quickly. Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, together with 84 trillion gods, lifted the jeweled structure that had delighted the Bodhisattva and placed it atop a great mansion in the Brahma realm that was 300 leagues high. Surrounded by all these many trillions of gods, he then descended back down to Jambudvipa. At that time, there was a great gathering of gods from the desire realm who wished to serve the Bodhisattva. These gods further embellished the jeweled structure that had delighted the Bodhisattva, using divine fabrics, garlands, perfumes, flowers, music, and other divine delights. The most eminent among the gods all surrounded the structure. At the same time, Sakra, Lord of the gods, was standing far away, on top of Mount Sumeru, in the middle of the ocean. Shielding his face with his palm, he turned his head and stared out, unblinking and completely transfixed, but he was unable to see the jeweled structure. Why was that? Among the gods, those of Brahma realm have the greatest ability, and the gods in the heaven of the 33, the heaven free from strife, the heaven of joy, the heaven of delighting in emanations, and the heaven of making use of others' emanations are inferior in comparison to them. So what need is there to speak of Sakra, master of the gods? At that moment, the Blessed One quieted the divine music, because the humans in the Jambudvipa would all go insane merely from hearing such music. The 4 great kings now came before Sakra, Lord of the gods, and asked him, Lord of the gods, what can we do? We are unable to see this jeweled structure that delighted the Bodhisattva. Friends, what can I do? Sakra responded. I also cannot see it right now. Nevertheless, friends, when it is brought into the presence of the Blessed One, we should be able to see it. The 4 great kings pleaded, Lord of the gods, for that reason, let us quickly do whatever is necessary to see it. Friends, replied Sakra, wait until the best of the superior gods come into the presence of the Blessed One and delight him. Thus they stood aside, turned their heads, and gazed intently at the Blessed One. Suddenly, Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, arrived together with 84 trillion gods, carrying the jeweled structure that had delighted the Bodhisattva, and bringing it in front of the thus going.
The jeweled structure, the jeweled structure that had delighted the Bodhisattva was finely shaped, exquisite and beautiful to behold. It was square in form and had 4 pillars. At the top was a beautifully adorned upper floor, scaled to fit a 6-month-old fetus. Inside that upper chamber was a throne with a sitting area that was likewise scaled to fit a 6-month-old fetus. There is nothing whatsoever in the world, including the realms of gods and Brahma gods, that is similar in color and shape to the jeweled structure that delighted the Bodhisattva. When the gods saw it, their eyes were dazzled and they were amazed. When it was placed in the presence of the thus gone one, it gleamed, radiated heat, and shone brightly. This multi-storied structure was as resplendent as gold that had been smelted twice by an expert goldsmith, so that it had become perfectly refined and free from any impurity. Likewise, nothing whatsoever in all the divine realms can compare to the size and shape of the throne inside the structure that had delighted the Bodhisattva, except perhaps the neck of the Bodhisattva, which resembles a conch in shape and color. Even the garments worn by the great Brahma lost their beauty in front of the Bodhisattva's throne. causing them to resemble cast-off black blankets that have been beaten by wind and rain. The temple was made from uraga sandalwood, which is so precious that a single mote of its dust is equal in value to 1,000 universes. Furthermore, the temple was surrounded on all sides by more such uraga sandalwood. Inside that temple hovered an identical second structure, which did not touch the first structure. Inside the second temple hovered an identical third structure, which also did not touch the second structure. Within that third temple made of incense was a throne with cushions. The color of the uraga sandalwood was like the finest blue beryl. Around the temple of incense were all types of flowers that surpassed even those of the gods. They had not been planted there, but appeared solely because of the maturation of the Bodhisattva's previous basic virtue. That precious structure that delighted the Bodhisattva was like a diamond, solid, firm, and indestructible. Yet it was also pleasant to the touch, like Pasilandika cloth. Moreover, the precious structure that delighted the Bodhisattva clearly reflected all that is found within the abodes of the gods of the desire realm. On the evening in which the Bodhisattva entered the womb, a lotus appeared from below the waters, piercing the earth and rising up 6,800,000 leagues, as far as the Brahma realm. Only the best of charioteers and the great Brahma, who is master of 1,000 powers, were able to see that flower. To everyone else, it was invisible. In that great lotus appeared a drop of nectar, which embodied the extracted essence and vitality of the entire great trichilocosm. The great Brahma placed this drop into a beautiful vessel of beryl and offered it to the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva accepted the gift, and out of affection for the great Brahma, he drank it. Apart from a Bodhisattva in his final existence, who has completed all the Bodhisattva stages, no other being is able to digest a drop of vital energy.
What were the previous actions that prepared the Bodhisattva for digesting this drop of vital energy? When the Bodhisattva was practicing the conduct of a Bodhisattva for extended periods in the past, he gave medicine to the sick, fulfilled the wishes of those who had aspirations, and never abandoned those who came to him for refuge. He always offered the finest flowers, the best fruits, and the most delicious foods first to the thus gone ones, the memorials of the thus gone ones, the Sangha of hearers of the thus gone ones, and his parents. Only then would he cater to his own needs. It was as a result of this activity that the great Brahma offered the Bodhisattva this drop of nectar. Within that temple, all the most excellent, exquisite pleasures and amusements came together, manifesting due to the maturation of the Bodhisattva's previous actions. Moreover, within this previous precious structure that delighted the Bodhisattva, a set of garments appeared, known as the ornament of 100,000. Apart from the Bodhisattva in his final existence, no other being anywhere could ever receive such garments. In fact, all possible sublime and perfect forms, sounds, smells, tastes, textures were present within that peak structure. In this way, the temple that delighted the Bodhisattva was completely perfect and finely constructed both inside and outside. It was also pleasant to touch, like silk from Kalinga. This is merely an example, for in reality, nothing could compare to it. Because of the previous aspirations of the Bodhisattva, his intentions were accomplished. It is the nature of things that a great Bodhisattva is born into this human world. Having renounced his home, he attains perfect and complete awakening and turns the wheel of Dharma. Yet before he enters his mother's womb, a temple of precious materials is manifest on the right side of the mother's womb. Then, as the Bodhisattva transmigrates from heaven to joy, he remains seated in a cross-legged position in that tiered chamber. The body of a Bodhisattva in his last existence is free from the 4 stages of embryonic development. Instead, he appears seated with all his limbs, organs, and characteristics fully formed. As such, Queen Maya saw the arrival of an elephant in her dream.
Now Sakra, Lord of the Gods, as well as the 4 great kings, the 28 great commanders of the Yaksas, and the master of the Guyaksas, who are the type of Yaksa from which Vajrapana came, all knew that the Bodhisattva had entered the womb of his mother, and they constantly stayed close to him. The Bodhisattva also had 4 goddesses named Yukali, Samudkali, Davavati, and Pravavati serve him. When these 4 goddesses knew that the Bodhisattva had entered the womb of his mother, they kept a constant guard over him. In addition, when Sakra, Lord of the Gods, discovered that the Bodhisattva had entered the womb of his mother, he brought along 500 gods to constantly follow the Bodhisattva. The body of the Bodhisattva who had entered the womb of his mother developed certain features. For example, it is like great fire burning on a mountain top during the darkest night, visible from a league of even 5 leagues away. The body of the Bodhisattva, as he entered the womb of his mother, was just this way. It was radiant, well-formed, handsome, and pleasing to see. As he sat with crossed legs inside the peaked structure, he was exceedingly beautiful. He appeared to have golden hue, shining like refined gold, adorned with precious beryl. The mother of the Bodhisattva could also see the Bodhisattva within her womb, for in the same way that a lightning bolt illumines everything as it emerges from a mass of clouds, so the Bodhisattva was dwelling in his mother's womb, also illuminated the innermost chamber of the precious temple through his splendor, brilliance, and color. When that was illuminated, he illuminated the metal chamber of the fragrant temple. When the second level of the fragrant temple was illuminated, the light went further, illuminated the outer chamber of the fragrant temple. And as the third level of the fragrant temple was bathed in light, his mother's entire body became filled with light. The light then went farther and illuminated the seat upon which his mother was seated. Gradually, the light streamed forth and brightened the entire palace. The light rays rose beyond the palace and illuminated the east. Likewise, the Bodhisattva was residing in the womb of his mother. The glory, brilliance, and color of the Bodhisattva illuminated the south, the west, north, below, and above. In fact, all 10 directions were bathed in light for several miles in each direction. Monks in the early morning, the 4 great kings and 28 great commanders of the Yaksas gathered with 500 Yaksas arrived to meet the Bodhisattva and to offer him their respect and veneration, also to listen to the Dharma at that time. The Bodhisattva, who was aware of their arrival, extended his right hand and pointed out their seats. The guardians of the world and the other guests sat down on the arranged seats. They perceived the Bodhisattva, who was in the womb of his mother, in the
form of a child who has already taken birth, extending his hand and moving it in various positions. Upon seeing this, they prostrated to the Bodhisattva and were filled with joy, devotion, and well-being. When the Bodhisattva saw that they were settled, he taught them the Dharma teaching and instructed them, inspired them, and delighted them. When they wished to go, the Bodhisattva, who knew full well their thoughts, extended his right hand as a farewell greeting. As he retracted his hand, there was no harm done to his mother. The 4 great kings understood the greeting and thought, "We have been dismissed by the Bodhisattva." Then they circled around the Bodhisattva and his mother 3 times before departing. This was the circumstance and the reason why the Bodhisattva, in the quiet of the night, would extend his right hand and draw it back. Finally, he would let the hand rest while maintaining mindfulness and carefulness. At other times, when people came to see the Bodhisattva, be they women or men, boys or girls, he would first joyfully welcome them, and then his mother would do the same. Monks, in this way, the Bodhisattva became very skilled at initiating delightful salutations as he dwelt in his mother's womb. There was no one, whether god, naga, yaksa, human, or non-human, who was ever able to greet the Bodhisattva first with a delightful salutation. Instead, the Bodhisattva would initiate the salutations, and afterwards the mother of the Bodhisattva would joyfully welcome the guests. When the morning had passed and the noon hour arrived, Sakra, the Lord of the gods, along with the most eminent gods of the heaven of the 33, came to meet the Bodhisattva and to offer him their respect and veneration, and also to listen to the Dharma. The Bodhisattva, who saw them coming from a distance, extended his golden-colored right hand, and, to the delight of Sakra, Lord of the gods, and the gods of the heaven of the 33, pointed out their seats. Monks, at that moment, Sakra, Lord of the gods, was unable to resist the Bodhisattva's request, and so he and the gods all settled down on the seats that had been arranged for them. When the Bodhisattva knew that they were settled, he taught them a Dharma teaching and instructed them, inspired them, and delighted them. In whichever direction the Bodhisattva would extend his hand, the mother of the Bodhisattva would turn to face that way. Then the gods reflected, "The Bodhisattva is having a heartwarming conversation with me." And each one of them thought, The Bodhisattva is speaking directly to me. To me alone, he extends a friendly welcome. All the while, the images of Sakra, Lord of the gods, and those of the gods of the heaven of the 33 were reflected within the temple. Thus, nowhere else were the Bodhisattva's enjoyments as perfectly pure as in the womb of his mother.
Monks, when Sakra, Lord of the gods, and the other gods wished to depart, the Bodhisattva, who knew full well their thoughts, extended his right hand as a farewell greeting. As he retracted his hand, there was no harm done to his mother. At the same time, Sakra, Lord of the gods, and the other gods of the heaven of the 33 reflected, "We have been dismissed by the Bodhisattva." Then they circled around the Bodhisattva and his mother 3 times before departing. Monks, noontime passed, and it was now evening when Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, surrounded by many hundreds of thousands of gods, approached the Bodhisattva, carrying a drop of the vital force of the divine realms. They came to meet the Bodhisattva and to offer him their respect and veneration, and also to listen to the Dharma. Monks, the Bodhisattva knew that Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, was arriving together with his retinue. And again he raised his golden-colored right hand. He cordially greeted Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, and those gods of the pure realms, and pointed out their seats to them. Monks, again it was not possible for Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, to resist the Bodhisattva's command. Thus, Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, as well as the other gods of the pure realms, settled on those seats that had been arranged. When the Bodhisattva knew that they were settled, he taught them a Dharma teaching and instructed them, inspired them, and delighted them. In whichever direction the Bodhisattva would extend his hand, the mother of the Bodhisattva would turn to face that way. Then the gods reflected, "The Bodhisattva is having a heartwarming conversation with us." And each one of them thought, "The Bodhisattva is speaking directly to me. To me alone he extends a friendly welcome." Monks, when Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, and those gods of the pure realms wished to depart, the Bodhisattva, who knew full well their thoughts, extended his right hand as a farewell greeting. As he retracted his hand with mindfulness and carefulness, there was no harm done to his mother. Then Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, and those gods of the pure realms reflected, "We have been dismissed by the Bodhisattva." Then they circled around the Bodhisattva and his mother 3 times before departing. Finally, the Bodhisattva let his hand rest while maintaining mindfulness and carefulness. Monks from everywhere, such as the east, the south, the west, the north, above and below, many hundreds of thousands of bodhisattvas came to meet the Bodhisattva and to offer him their respect and veneration, and also to listen to the Dharma and correctly proclaim that Dharma. Once they had arrived, the Bodhisattva's body began emitting light, which manifested into lion thrones. The Bodhisattva then indicated to the Bodhisattvas to take their seats on these thrones.
When he knew that they were settled, the Bodhisattva questioned and examined the Bodhisattvas regarding the divisions pertaining to the great vehicle. However, with the exception of the gods who were of equal fortune, no one perceived this. Monks, this was the circumstance and the reason why the Bodhisattva projected light from his body in the quiet of the night. Monks, while the Bodhisattva was dwelling in the womb of his mother, Queen Maya did not feel any heaviness in her body. On the contrary, she felt light, supple, and happy, and she did not experience any uncomfortable pains in her belly. She was not afflicted by attachment, anger, or delusion. She did not entertain any desirous thoughts, nor any thoughts of ill will or harm. She neither experienced nor witnessed any heat, cold, hunger, thirst, gloom, uncleanliness, or fatigue. No unpleasant forms, sounds, smells, tastes, or textures appeared to her. And she also had no bad dreams. There was no female deception, guile, envy, or feminine disturbing emotions to trouble her. At that time, the mother of the Bodhisattva observed the 5 basic precepts. She was disciplined and followed the path of the 10 virtuous actions. The mother of the Bodhisattva never desired any man whomsoever. Neither did any man feel lust in the presence of the mother of the Bodhisattva. Merely by seeing the mother of the Bodhisattva, any woman, man, boy, or girl in the city of Kilavastu and its surrounding areas who had been possessed was cured and regained consciousness immediately, regardless of whether they had been possessed by gods, nagas, yaksas, Gandharvas, demagogues, Garudas, or Bhutas. Those non-human beings quickly departed for other places. All those who had been struck by illness were freed from their disease as soon as the mother of the Bodhisattva placed her right hand on the top of their head. In this way, she would cure those who suffered from any illness or ailment that arises from disharmony among the wind, bile, or phlegm. Or ailment that arises from disharmony among wind, bile, or phlegm. She would cure illnesses related to the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and lips, as well as toothaches, throat diseases, goiters, lumps, various forms of leprosy, tuberculosis, madness, dementia, fevers, swellings, boils, rashes, scabs, and other illnesses. Once they were freed from their disease, these people would return to their homes. Queen Maya would also pick herbs and distribute them to the sick, who would immediately regain their health and vigor. When Queen Maya looked inside her belly, she saw the Bodhisattva resting on the right side of her womb. She could see this as clearly as if she was looking at her own face in a spotless mirror. Seeing him in that way, she
was satisfied, elated, and delighted. She felt extremely happy, buoyant, and joyful. Monks, through the blessings of the Bodhisattva staying in his mother's womb, the sounds of divine musical instruments arose constantly without interruption both day and night, and a rain of divine flowers fell. The gods sent timely rains, and the winds blew at appropriate moments. The seasons and the stars all moved in a balanced manner. The kingdom was joyful and the harvests were bountiful. There were no disturbances or animosity anywhere. In the city of Kapilavastu, the clan of the Shakyas and everyone else had plenty to eat and drink, and they enjoyed themselves with various amusements. They were generous and created merit. They happily amused themselves just as one does during the autumn festival at the end of the 4th month. King Shuddhodana devoted himself purely to religious practice. Setting aside all his kingly work, he lived in complete purity as if he had entered an ascetic's grove. With great delight, he followed the Dharma. Monks, such were the miraculous marvels that occurred while the Bodhisattva remained in his mother's womb. At this time, the Blessed One asked Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, would you like to see the jeweled structure that delighted the Bodhisattva when he stayed in his mother's womb?" Ananda replied, "Yes, Blessed One, I would love to, well-gone one." The Blessed One then showed the jeweled structure to Venerable Ananda as well as to Shaka, Lord of the gods, the 4 guardians of the world, and many other gods and humans. As they saw the structure, they were satisfied, uplifted, and full of rejoicing. In a joyful mood, they were happy and delighted. Then once again, Brahma, Lord of the Saha world, lifted up the jeweled structure and brought it with him to the Brahma realm, where he installed it as an object of worship. Then the Blessed One again addressed the monks. Monks, in this way, while the Bodhisattva dwelt in his mother's womb, he ripened 36 million gods and humans within the 3 vehicles. On this topic, it is said, when the victor's son, the great being, settled in his mother's womb. The earth with its forest shook 6 ways. Golden light shone forth, and all the lower realms were purified. All the gods joyfully proclaimed, he will be a Dharma king. Well shaped and resplendent with many jewels is the great mansion where the hero, the perfect guide, has ascended and remains.
It is resplendent, filled with exquisitely fragrant sandalwood, a few grams of which is worth the whole trichalcasium filled with jewels. Bursting forth from beneath this great trichalcasium, a lotus, which is a mine of good qualities, emerged from a drop of vital energy. Within 7 days, it reached the world of Brahma through the power of merit. Brahma collected the vital drop and offered it to the victor's son. Apart from the Bodhisattva, a mighty hero, no being anywhere could digest this drop. This drop of vital energy is imbued with the merits of many eons. Whoever consumes it becomes pure in body, mind, and consciousness. Shakra, Brahma, and the guardians of the world paid the Bodhisattva 3 visits in order to make offerings to the guide. They prostrated and made offerings, listened to the sublime Dharma. Then they circled around him and returned to their abodes. From all worlds and realms came Bodhisattvas desiring the Dharma. Sitting on seats of light, they illumined each other because they heard the sacred Dharma of the Supreme Vehicle. They all could leave with joy, proclaiming songs of praise. Any woman or child afflicted by suffering, possessed by spirits, with troubled mind, naked and covered with dust, recovered their senses upon seeing Queen Maya. With intelligence and mindfulness restored, they returned to their homes. Those afflicted by illnesses caused by disorders of wind, bile, or phlegm, and those with body and mind tormented by diseases of the eyes and ears, and all those stricken by the many different kinds of ailments, were freed from illness when Queen Maya placed her hand on their heads. Moreover, gathering herbs from the ground, Maya gave them to the sick, who also became cured. Happy and healthy, they returned to their homes. While the king of the physicians, the remedy itself, dwelt in the womb. Whenever Queen Maya examined her body, she saw the Bodhisattva in her womb.
Like the moon in the sky encircled by stars, the Bodhisattva was ornamented by marks. She was untroubled by attachment, anger, or delusion, had no sexual desires, nor envy or ill will. With a joyful and elated mind, she was blissful, never bothered by hunger, thirst, or heat or cold. The sounds of divine instruments constantly arose without being played. Excellent sublime flowers, fragrant with divine perfumes, fell like rain. Gods and humans beheld this, and none of them felt any resentment or ill will toward one another. Beings rejoiced and played and made offerings of food and drink. They uttered a cry of joy, content and delighted as they were. The kingdom was at peace, undisturbed with well-timed rain. Grasses, medicinal herbs, and flowers grew in a timely manner. Over the royal palace, a rain of jewels fell for 7 days. Impoverished beings brought them home and enjoyed the bounty. At that time, there were no impoverished or suffering beings. Everyone was as joyful as the beings in the pleasure grove top Mount Meru. The king of Sakyas observed the mending purification ritual. Leaving his royal duties, he only practiced the Dharma. He went into the grove of the ascetics and said to Mayadeva, "How blissful your body must be, bearing the perfect being." This concludes the 6th chapter on entering the womb.
Very good. Thank you all. Would anyone like to try and paraphrase what we just read, entering the womb?
So basically, just so I can understand it from the abstract, when you're in your last, I guess, reincarnation, you don't go through the embryonic stages. Is that everyone or just the Bodhisattva? Or I guess that is being Bodhisattva.
Well, do you think that that's mythology? Do you think it's hyperbole? You know, do you think
Oh,
that
sure. Is Bernie
what
on?
what you know, using your 21st century mind, what do you think about that?
It's nonsensical to me, given the ultrasounds we have. It's what Bernie called a whole bunch of icing on top of the cake. Sorry, I just took us off. I was just curious if that was one of the ways they describe someone who is in their last, basically, birth, if that was a distinguishing sort of part of the being brought into, like, so intentional, right? Like they were intentional about who they were going into or their mother. I don't, you want us to summarize the main points of chapter 6, like from the symbolism, or just
Well, let somebody else make a comment too, and then we can get back to that then. You know, to me, I'll just say this. To me, there is a certain sacredness, a certain holiness, if you will, a certain transcendence of normal human beings. The Saha world is this phenomenal world in which we live, and there's this transcendence of as we develop as Bodhisattva, we sort of have this feeling of this holiness that maybe wasn't present in our lives beforehand. Has anybody else experienced that? Would anybody else like to express their thoughts on that?
Bernie, you do.
I'm a little late for the class tonight and dropping in the middle of the conversation. Uh, all this is exaggeration and sanctification of the life story of the Buddha. And the point of it all is just to, as far as I can see, just to exalt the Buddha even higher than he was. So supposedly the origin of these were stories that accumulated around Buddha's life, legendary stories that accumulated after his death. And this is the final result of all those stories is this particular sutra. So obviously, any, as you said, any child in the womb, any fetus in the womb is going to go through the normal stages of development. At what stage it's possible for any kind of consciousness to exist in the womb, I really don't know. Maybe some scientist somewhere knows to what an extent that the child in the womb could be considered a conscious being and capable of thinking. It doesn't seem, I've heard stories that children in the womb respond to music, so obviously there's some kind of consciousness, but it's never been a big subject for me. It's not something that really interests me, so I don't know much about it. But I mean, it's just the talking about the idea is that the Bodhisattva never stopped teaching, even though he wasn't quite the Buddha yet. But I'm curious because obviously at some point, maybe with his birth, he has to forget everything because he has to rediscover everything when he leaves home, when he leaves the palace. So I don't know how they're going to handle that unless they present it just as a sort of a game or something like that. I don't know how they're going to do it.
Well, let me ask, do you think the metaphor of the holiness, the sacredness, is that something that comes through? Does that mean
Well,
anything?
obviously they're exalting and sanctifying the Buddha. They're saying he's not a normal human being. They're raising him above the normal human level.
Is this our story? Is this the story of a human being?
Well, they're saying things right here which, as we all know, are physically impossible. Obviously, can a
Let
human
me
being?
ask Debbie. Debbie, what do you think
No.
about that?
All right, I agree with everything everybody said so far, but the Great Array, I think if one of the Great Array is the Buddha in the womb and his mother are like facets of a jewel in how many different palaces? that in order for this to be even like semi-logical, those things weren't happening here, right? So, Bernie made the point, he's still teaching, but he could be teaching in one of these other god palaces. So I'm wondering if that's what they're trying to say. It's like when he was here on Earth, Maya was here on Earth, and she had a good pregnancy. And but they definitely inflated it because you can't just sit on the right side of the uterus. It doesn't work that way. Elephants don't go. So some elements, yeah, I think are just myth. But if you live in a world in which it is possible for the woman who's carrying a bodhisattva who's going to be either a universal king or, the most important holy being ever, you accept the idea that it's happening in a certain way here, but it's also happening in other places, which are fantastic places in which fantastic things are happening. So it's the best I got.
Congo, would you like to comment on this?
Sure. So I think that there's two ways that this strikes me. There's the way that Bernie mentioned and other people mentioned, that you mentioned this, a way of venerating the Buddha, because of the wonderful things his teachings have brought so many people, this kind of like mythologizing or celebrating how important he was, even and then placing that importance on his whole story. So every part of the story becomes a way of celebrating the teachings in that way, venerating the teachings. And then the other way I understand it is this idea that if you're looking at the world through enlightened eyes, every single event becomes like a miraculous event. So the birth of the Buddha becomes a miraculous event, but so are all human births miraculous events, if you can see them that way. And all the descriptions of the gods visiting and the teachings and the supernatural events, it's just a way of communicating the magic of life and just the magic of birth. And it's just done in that tradition of the Mahayana literature comes out of that tradition. Is this amazing tradition of trying to use description to communicate awe and just the amazing thing. And I think they do a wonderful job. I think if we dismiss it as just a mythological story or just as a way of making the Buddha into a divine being, then we kind of miss out on deeper teaching, which I think for us as 21st century people could be more effective. I think for me, just that reminder that this whole world is an amazing experience and a miraculous experience, and we can take that same perspective that we're looking at the Buddha's birth and take it into every part of our life, in all our conversations, all our mundane activities. I think that's the most important message I get from this particular story. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to point something out that, this came out of what was a Hindu tradition. And the Hindus had their own iconography of this, and not the least of which is something like this. I'm going to try and hold this up, I hope you can see this. This is called the divine, the universal form of the array. It's all the different array of what Krishna would be, or what God was, or what Brahma was, and so on. So this comes from the Bhagavad Gita, which was a very popular book back in the day, and so on. So it comes out of that. I think that a lot of these stories come out of that, and so on, and they're used as points of reference, for people to say, oh, this is that holiness that's even beyond all that, because the Buddha was prophesied in these Hindu scriptures and so on. So this whole story comes out of that, But as we've learned with the Buddhism, and that it's our story, it's the human story, So being in that miraculous womb is this, the sacred temple that they're describing here for pages and pages and so on, in this miraculous way and so on, is like Kunga just said, that's our story, that's who we are. And to be able to view it as that is part of the holiness of this, because I think as we move through the progression, through the being on the path, there is for myself anyway, and for a lot of the things that I've read, understood, and other people expressed, that there is this holiness quality to it. There is this sacredness to it. So, would anybody else like to comment on any of that? Gary, what do you think about this?
Well, to me, this is like a tapestry of the Buddha's life and teachings. And not all of it may need to be taken literally, but to be taken holistically in terms of the energy of his life and teachings. And of the journey that we're all on. That's what I received from it.
So you relate to it in a personal way, that this is a human story.
Oh yes, I think we must, for it to have meaning.
So it's not a supernatural thing.
No.
If it is, we're part of the supernatural.
Well, true.
So
I mean,
it's just a way of using words, right?
It's a way of using words of imparting the energy of the teaching and what we're seeking, the journey that we are on.
Matt, what would you have to say about this?
It's with the sutra overall, and some of the other exposure I've had to Mahayana sutras, it's kind of psychedelic, or that's the word that comes to mind for me. It's so fantastical. The imagery is so rich and everything that I don't know if I kind of like let it wash over me in a way without trying to get too left-brained analytical with it. It kind of has a certain type of effect, or sits with me in a way that I think can be powerful. One thing that I struggle with some of the Mahayana presentation of the Buddha is, for me, particularly when, many years ago when I first came across Buddhism, part of what was so powerful to me about it to me was the humanness of the Buddha. The idea of with my own background, this never even occurred to me, like this a spirituality based on someone who was, it wasn't that was like fully human or something, that it wasn't a divine revelation. It's like a human who discovered something that was deep, that someone, it's like it's hard for me to relate to this Buddha that they talk about there. This is just maybe a limitation of my own imagination or something, but so that's one thing on the other side that for me is a little tougher with some of the Mahayana sutras. But I think things like myth or can sometimes point to truths in ways that are very powerful, that more literal explanations of things can't too.
Very good. So do we think it's fair to interpret this, or I guess the right word is to interpret this with our 21st century minds, and not take it so literally, but figuratively, in the respect that there is this, phantasmic, thing, this miracle, and here it's trying to characterize this in a phantasmic way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have any. I was going to say I don't think we have any choice but to, only in the sense of we can only interpret it through the minds that we do have in our own, our own conditioning as, 21st century people. Yeah, but I will say, even with like the mythological elements to it, in this chapter particularly, I do have trouble seeing like what are like is like the mythology and everything around it, like what is it trying to say to me, that like what is the underlying message behind this chapter. I'm having trouble like connecting that, really, to be honest, of what is all of this kind of pointing to beyond what you know Bernie was saying in terms of the veneration of the Buddha and that sense of kind of devotion and majesty or something.
I think it has to do with planning. Because I work for the government.
Huh.
All right. So how would this work, right? This is reality we're talking about. And so it has to be logical. So if any of this is possible, that you could achieve enlightenment, and when you die, you don't have to come back. You have choices, there are places. This is goal-directed behavior, right?
This is what behavior?
Goal-directed behavior. It's planning.
Intention.
Yeah, well, the reason why I said it is like it has to occur somewhere, right? So we have these beings who are becoming enlightened, and they're gathering somewhere, they're interacting somehow. And one of them has achieved as close to enlightenment as you could, decides to go down and try and help again. He's not alone up there, right? He's not the first thing that's ever existed. The universe is what we have. Well, it's forever. It's everything forever, right? So in the context, how would it work? In the context of everything forever, and when you're born, your mind comes, your mind enters your body. When you die, it leaves. It has a continuity, it's like it's a part of reality or wherever, when they classify things like Tushita Heaven or Dewa Chen, they're saying that. How is this actually really going to work? And they are going to load it up with beauty and symbolism and majesty and the perfection of this being. And yeah, he's in the womb. He's in 6 places at once. But I think it's planning. It's showing planning. And this is a document that would have been written a couple of thousand years ago. So maybe that.
Does anybody know what the word gape means? If I'm mispronouncing it, please tell me. G-A-P-E, gape. I've seen it expressed in the Christian sense.
Do you mean
Agape?
agape?
Huh? Gape.
Agape?
No, just gape.
Oh, because agape is something. I don't know what agape is.
Agape is just a word for love, but
Agape. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's been a while. Agape. You're right.
Agape and arete, it's Greek. It's love. Arete is romantic love.
It's the love that God has
It's
for
pure.
his children.
Yes, agape is the pure
Agape.
love. Yeah.
Yeah, forgive me for not saying it right the first time. But to come out of this experience, or to have this experience, to have that you have that love of God. I mean, that's the way I've experienced it. That's what this bodhicitta, loving kindness, that agape, the compassion, the agape, the joy, the agape, the equanimity, the agape. This is the mind, the heart mind, that now becomes your reality in this experience. So they're trying to, sanctify this, like Bernie said, they're trying to create this, mental, illusion of what this is and so on, and to bring that forth. But, but the other point is that this is the human experience of being born and going through that.
Okay, well, the question is, what qualities did the Bodhisattva bring with him from his previous life? And
well, isn't that all the light of the Dharma, the gateways, all the gateway, all?
well,
light?
that was his teaching. What's normally said is
But that was his teaching of what that was.
that Buddha is born from the accumulation of merit and wisdom, and so presumably he had the merit and wisdom of a great Bodhisattva when he entered this birth. Now, how merit manifests is an interesting question, because wisdom, of course, is formless. It can't be expressed. But merit, of course, does have form and can be seen. So basically, this would seem to be the expression of the accumulation of merit of the Bodhisattva, that he could, well, everything apart from his own teaching was that shows here, like the healing of various people. That would be through the, presumably through the accumulation of merit. So merit is a little bit different than love, as you said, you were describing it. Of course, I don't know exactly how to explain these things, because I haven't thought about them very much, but it would seem to be that what's being expressed here is the opulence of everything is just a way of expressing the immense accumulation of merit that the Buddha had from his previous lives.
Another thing I was thinking some when listening to it and reading it, though I'm not sure whether how much of this was the kind of at the heart of what was intended to be communicated by the chapter itself, though, but was the idea of emptiness. For example, where there's certain beings that could see the lotus flower and others couldn't. I guess could connect with merit as well. They have the merit to see it. Or the different emanations, and so that this idea of emptiness and something I was thinking about, even in with my own life of reflecting on some of, like, because I was telling you all earlier before we started recording, but I was having some trouble with with depression recently that had been kind of flaring up, which has been a kind of a chronic issue for me off and on in my life, and the degree to which everything for me becomes colored by that depression. And then when it starts to recede, these same exact things I perceive and experience in a radically different way. And to me, that's, albeit maybe on a more superficial level, but that emptiness, that, this reality that I'm experiencing, or that any of us are experiencing, at least for us, is coming from largely or completely from, our own consciousness, from our own mind. And some of this, the majesty of this and everything, and I think can relate to our experience of it, to what our own merit is, to what to what everyone's saying, and the idea of emptiness, of our experience of it is not of an experience of something that inherently exists outside of our concepts. That also it was making me reflect on that some reading the chapter.
Well, that brings me to an interesting story, since you mentioned the lotus flower that some beings could see. This is from the autobiography of a Chinese monk, a Zen monk called Xu Yong. And he went to visit a shrine in which there was a relic of the Buddha. I can't remember what, probably a tooth, but I'm not sure. And he saw the saw the relic, and then he started doing prostrations. And as he did prostrations, to him, the form of the relic changed, and he could see. I don't know what he saw, but he said as he did more practice and he did more prostrations to it, the form of the relic changed. So it's important to understand. And although I'm not a big fan of drugs, but one thing drugs have shown people is how much our perception of the world depends upon us and who we are, and less than we think depends upon the world. It's not so much that the world imposes its reality on us. We create the reality out of what we experience in the world. And a lot of that is dependent on our psychology. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I think there's lots of, there's lots to read in here, with this, and I look at it all as being, metaphor, but in 6.49, he's talking about, there's talking about illuminating light. And they're in the three chambers, the three temples within a temple, and the temples are completely, free of connection to the other temples and so on. But here's a transcendence of language, that goes into light, and that these, so understanding, the teachings in terms of what light means, the meaning that has, and then to experience light, to be able to go into that level of meditation, that transcendence where the I, me mind disappears. And when the I, me mind becomes invisible or goes away, because it's vibrating at a certain level, but then you're transcending that, and then light becomes the language. To be able to recognize that, to be able to accept that, oh, maybe this is what needs to happen, and I need to develop the technique to be able to allow myself to recognize that. There's another point in here. There's two instances where it seems that all of a sudden the Bodhisattva is having a conversation with Ananda. Ananda is one of his disciples. And Ananda is asking him some very logical kinds of questions. And to be able to suss them out is interesting. So, yes, go ahead.
This has to be Buddha recounting his life story and telling it to Ananda later, because traditionally Ananda
yes, that's
was
true.
born on the day that the Buddha left the palace. So obviously,
Well, I think this is all in the point that the Buddha Shakyamuni is recounting all of this. Here was my experience in the womb.
right.
You're right. It's a very magical mystery tour moment, because it's this complete digression. Like, narratively, this really complex thing is happening, and then it's like, hey, Ananda, you want to see my old crib? And it's this object or this structure. It's really specific. Doesn't exist anywhere in nature. And that in itself is fascinating. how did they, how did that even arise? I don't know if that is within Hinduism. I'll admit I'm not very well read in Hinduism.
Well, a sphere within a sphere within a sphere.
Well, yeah, but it's a weird place for that to appear. And it's true, everything gets derailed. He's like, you have to see this thing. And then you can't just see it. You know, Brahma can see it, but Ananda is just a human being, so he can't see it. And so the narrative just takes this lurch of all the things that have to happen so that it can be brought where everybody can see it. And we know that many of the gods can't see it because they're like, yeah, we don't have the power to see it.
Well, I think my point would be that having all this detail of these visualizations, the way they're expressed here, isn't as important as having the transcendence of realizing that love. You know, that's so, and that's when we talk about that it can't be expressed, it has to be experienced. And even by being experienced, it still can't be expressed.
Well, you could say that the purpose of the text is to create an emotional response within you. And that response could be reverence, or if you are the right kind of person, or other people, of course, would have the opposite reaction. But you can't say that the literal words of the text are not meant to be understood in some sense, and it was just there to create an emotional reaction.
So let me ask this question. Does this turn you on? Or does it put you off? Zara, what do you think?
I'm neutral with you talking about this particular chapter, or just the reading of the sutra in general.
I think right now just keep it on this particular chapter.
Well, as I was reading it, each morning, I had thoughts of Bernie in my head, thinking about the icing and the cake, and I have to reread it. I got distracted by all the icing. I got to reread it, Lance. I have to synthesize it at a deeper
So
level.
does it turn you on or does it put you off?
Neither. Neither. I'm gonna land in the middle. I'm gonna hit Switzerland on that because I see it as sequence of events that are part of like the alphabet, where in order to get to the actual point of all of it, I have to read letter C to get to letter Z. So,
Okay, fair enough. Does
okay.
anybody get turned on by this?
I find it,
There's
yeah, go ahead.
we're not, I don't think that we're there yet. I think we're still in the stage of processing the very full substance of all this and experiencing it. To me, the writing is about experience in life and understanding what that experience is. I remember that the philosopher John Locke once wrote that life itself is a blank page upon which experience writes. And I think that the Buddha here is trying to help us to understand in our own personal terms the experience of life. But I'm not fully ready to explain what he means, because it may mean something different to each of us within the context of our own lives.
Well, my reaction is that I enjoy this kind of thing up to a certain point, even though I understand it's exaggeration or fantasy. But I think this text lays things on a little too thick. Obviously, there's if they it appeals to some people, but it was just they just too much, too much. They take a basic approach and they just overdo it. So I would enjoy a certain amount of this, hearing the Bodhisattva giving a talk in Tushita heaven certainly is charming, whether it happened or not, just as a later way of summarizing the teaching. But when you go through pages and pages of miraculous events, it's just a little too much, I think.
Do you think that talk in Tushita heaven is still present?
What do you mean it's still present? It's present in the book.
No, I mean, is the reality of that, is that teaching, is that talk still present, and it's just a matter of us tuning into that radio station?
Oh no, I don't
Or
think.
did it only happen? Or did it only happen 2,600 years ago,
Well,
and it's gone?
the basic teaching of Buddhism is impermanent, so certainly any teaching is impermanent as well. So
That's my point.
So yes,
So anytime we can tune into it, it's there.
not this particular talk. You can tune into the wisdom of enlightenment anytime you want to, but not this particular talk.
What about the allegory of it?
Well, an allegory is a temporary created thing.
Right.
It's
Are we, I saw something that Nicole Kidman said the other night that was really great. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
well, I would agree with that, but
So everything that we do, we're going to put in human terms.
but spiritual does not necessarily mean miraculous. Spiritual is everyday stuff, The stuff that we take for granted is very spiritual. Just life itself is spiritual.
But it's
And
all symbolic too, isn't it?
that's an interesting question. I can't answer that. It's symbolic, but symbolism exists only in does symbolism exist only in minds or outside of minds?
It's all relative, isn't that? That all
Well,
part of it, being human
something
is
is a
relative.
symbol for something is I can't answer that question. I don't have an opinion on it. It's a difficult question. At what point do meanings exist outside of minds? It's an interesting and difficult question to answer. It's like they argue about mathematics. Is mathematics something we discover, is something that was always there, and because it was always there, or is it something that we create? So it becomes a very difficult philosophical question.
Okay. Anybody else have any closing thoughts?
No, just that I do like it. But it's funny because it's not what I expected. And if you study with Tibetans, you're reading things like the Jewel Ornamental Liberation or the 6 week. You're reading these things that are very compact and direct. And then when you go to the sutras, there's all this other stuff going on. It's in there, but there's all this other stuff going on. And it, is cultural, couple of thousand years old. And it's always like, well, what are they, I understand why it's important. I understand why it would be transmitted first verbally and then, if these things went through Tibetans, then then they add what they add, the numbers. I'm always curious about what is the inherent numerology of, like, they'll say, oh, there were 80 trillion gods. The structure, the narrative structure, the things they talk about, sitting down, just reading about this. We're constantly talking about, thrones and offerings, and it's all around, it's very rooted in going places and meeting people and people visiting. It's something they're always talking about. And when, Queen Maya becomes pregnant, the king's like, where do you want to be resting? Right? It's like, well, what do we have to worry about now? It's like, we have to worry about where you're going to be. So you're going to be in 5 or 6 different palaces at once. The careful attention to detail on, the monks come because the king is like, what does all this mean? And they're saying he's, going to be a universal monarch, or he's going to be this fantastic holy person. And they get fed and gifted. And, and that was really, it's like, that is all over. It's all over all of our prayers. It's in, these things are embedded in, everything we read and everything we chant. But it's still always like, when I get to the sutras, this is so common that they're spending so much time talking about, things that were important then, and we're still looking at it. It's like, all right, there's a rain, it's like, oh, there has to be a rain of flowers, there has to be a rain of incense. There's a line here, it's like, we have to stop the divine music because it makes people insane. And then other places where the divine music was playing all the time, which made me wonder if maybe it wasn't happening on Earth, but in another one of those heavens. So yeah, it's interesting and frustrating and illuminating and confusing, I think, at the same time.
Okay. Congo wanted to say something.
When I read things like these, I tend to want to skim them and and try and pull out the things that are meaningful to me right now. I try not to even though I feel I'm skimming them, probably because I'm not really that interested in them, or they're not appealing to me. I try not to judge them, right? I try not to say this is not a good text, or this is not a good, well-written sutra, or I don't like this type of sutra. I try not to hold on to those things, even though I know I can feel them rising up in me. I try not to attach them. I think that, as I get more familiar with these things, I get more out of them. And even if what I get out of it right now is just that, I can see my whole life as miraculous, and maybe this is a reinforcement for seeing that in everyday life. That's a valuable thing. And sometimes you have to just kind of sit with things and not really understand why you're sitting with them, and then later there's some type of work going on there that you're not aware of. So I guess that's what I would say. I think it's important for me not to dislike the sutra or expect too much out of the sutra if I don't get it the first time I read it, or I don't feel like I understand it. It's better to just kind of put that all on hold, take what I can, and then maybe later, something more will come out of it, or as I get deeper in my practice, it'll be more meaningful to me. It's been around for over 2,000 years, and a lot of people, a lot more spiritually developed than myself, have got a lot out of it. That's why we're still looking at it. So I think it's good to always keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's let the prayer speak for itself. So if you've got your red book handy, let's do the dedication prayer by Jigden Sumgun, page 36, in the book that I have anyway. I know there's a couple different books. But the very first words are glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas. So we're invoking this glorious, this glory. We're invoking this holiness. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas. Divine assembly of Yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Sravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. The only way we can learn about this is through symbolism to help us to have our own personal experience.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you, Lance. Take care, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, definitely.
Thank you all. You guys are awesome. Have a good night.